The wind was a constant mourner in Bentwood Flats, a dry, sharp blade of air that moaned through the leaning shacks and scraped dust across the hard-packed earth. This was the kind of town that sat low and didn't look up a place of rust and ruin, where a man could lose his past and a woman could lose her soul, and no one would mark the occasion. The saloon lamps had just been lit, casting a yellow, drunken glow onto the empty street. That's when she came. A whisper of a woman, all sharp angles and hollowed cheeks, her bare feet cracked and bleeding on the cold dirt. Maria, a name that felt too soft for the hard lines of her face, was wrapped in a shawl the color of old sorrow. Her dress was torn, clinging to her like a second skin, and her eyes were not on the town, but on a place deep inside herself, a place where the fear lived. She moved with the silent, desperate calculation of a hunted animal, not with hope for that had been bled from her long ago, but with the bone-deep knowledge that she was out of time. He saw her from the general store, a sack of flowers slung over one broad shoulder. Will, a man whose name was a question and a promise, a quiet giant with a limp that told a story of its own. His beard was a dark forest with streaks of gray like early frost, his eyes a shadow under the brim of his hat. He wasn't like the others who had ducked inside or stared with hungry, cruel eyes. He just watched, his gaze as still and unmoving as a desert mesa. He had once been a man people feared, a bounty hunter, a soldier who read tracks and shot with an icy calm. But the war had hollowed him out, leaving him with a quiet life of goats and carrots and a deep-seated suspicion of men. But he hadn't moved from his spot. Not when he saw the limp, not when he saw the blood on her ankle. Maria stopped a few feet from him, her breath a ragged ghost in the cold air. She looked up, and for the first time her eyes met his, not with the offer of a bargain, but with the cold, hard weight of a last resort. Her voice was a dry rasp, a broken whisper of surrender. "If you want me, I'll do whatever you ask. I need bread, or somewhere warm, just for one night." Will didn't answer, his eyes dark as midnight swept over the fading bruises on her face, the cuts on her arms, the way her knees trembled. He saw not a body to be bought, but a person on the edge of breaking. He said nothing, simply tied the flour sack to his horse, gave a low click of his tongue, and turned toward the trail. She stood there, confusion and exhaustion warring in her eyes. Then he looked back, his voice a low, steady current in the silence. "You coming or not?" Her legs moved before her mind had a chance to argue, a silent agreement made of bone and instinct. She followed. The ride was a slow, agonizing crawl through the dust-choked twilight. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask her story. She rode behind him, her hands a loose anchor on the saddle, a breath away from slipping into the dark. The ranch sat low against a hill, a lonely ghost of a home. The barn leaned, the fences were broken, but a thin ribbon of smoke curled from the chimney, a beacon of improbable warmth. He helped her dismount, her legs buckling beneath her. His hand on her arm was rough from years of work, but his grip was gentle. He led her inside a house that smelled of firewood, iron, and a loneliness so profound it felt like a presence. He pointed to a cot. "That's yours." He gave her a bowl of soup, a hunk of bread, and a space to simply be. She ate, her hands shaking, her eyes darting between the food and the man who wasn't watching, wasn't hovering, wasn't waiting to be paid. When she finished, she looked up, her voice a hollow shell. "What do you want?" He turned, drying his hands slowly. "Nothing." He placed a quilt at the foot of her cot and walked to the door. "I sleep in the barn. If you need something, knock once." The door clicked shut, leaving her in the warm stillness. She lay on the cot, the quilt smelling of smoke and hay, and for the first time in a lifetime, she didn't wake up screaming. In the barn, Will sat on a stool, rubbing his old wound. He didn't know why he'd brought her back. He told himself it was just for one night, but in the quiet, bruised part of him, he knew. He had seen a piece of himself in her eyes, and he had made a decision. She stays. The sun hadn't yet risen when Maria opened her eyes. The room was a low-lit canvas of gray and ember light. No voices, no footsteps, just the gentle creak of the old house. Her body was a map of aches, not from violence, but from the brutal journey that had finally come to a halt. Her feet throbbed, her hands were raw, but her breathing was slow, steady. For the first time in weeks, the panic had loosened its grip. She sat up, her movements cautious, and surveyed the room again in the faint light. There were no weapons on the walls, no liquor bottles. He wasn't waiting. He was simply a man. She washed her face with cold water from the basin. The reflection in the ripples was a stranger, all sunken cheeks and red-rimmed eyes. A half-familiar ghost. She didn't know what kind of man Will was in the daylight, but last night he had been the quietest, most decent man she had ever met. Still, some men turned sour with the Sunday. She waited by the stove, her hands rubbing her arms, an hour passing in a heavy silence. Then the door creaked open. Will stepped in, a stiff hand rubbing his shoulder, his limp more pronounced in the morning chill. He didn't speak at first, just walked to the stove, stoked the coals, and dropped a few sticks of kindling. The sound of fire was the first real music she'd heard in a long time. "You sleep all right?" he asked, his voice low and even. She nodded, a small sound of gratitude catching in her throat. "Yes, thank you." He looked at her, and she felt the quiet weight of his gaze, not of judgment but of simple appraisal. He just wanted to know if she was telling the truth. "I'll make coffee," he said, the words startlingly normal. She just blinked. He poured water into the kettle, brought out a tin of oats, a jar of dried apples, and a clean bowl. He pushed a chair out with his foot. "Sit." She obeyed, a small tremor running through her. He prepared the food, set it before her. No sugar, no milk, but the warmth of it filled the room. Then he spoke again, not looking at her. "You need shoes." Her head came up slowly. "I don't have any." "I know." He went into a small room, little more than a closet, and came back with a pair of old boots, two big laces missing, but a sanctuary for her bleeding feet. He set them on the floor beside her. She stared at them. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. He poured 2 mugs of coffee, sat opposite her, and took a long drink. "You were half dead when I saw you. Seemed like something I shouldn't walk past." "That's it." He nodded once, a slow final gesture. "That's it." She studied his face, the dark eyes, the weathered lines, the scars. He wasn't lying. She took a bite of the oats, the heat and substance of it a shock to her system. It wasn't charity. It was a simple fact. He cleared his throat. "You got a name." "Maria," she said, her voice a fragile thing. He nodded. "Will." The sound of his name on his own lips made it feel more real. They sat in a comfortable silence, the quiet between them a new and precious thing. When she finished, she spoke again, the old fears rising in her throat. "You want me gone? I'll go." "You're not ready to go anywhere," he said without looking up. "Your feet are bleeding. Hands cracked. You won't make it to the next hill." He took a deep breath. "You can stay. I've got chores. Goats need feeding. Roof's leaking. You help out, you earn your keep. That's all." She blinked. "You mean work?" "Yeah, nothing more." The world for Maria had been a series of transactions. The idea of staying somewhere, just by working, felt alien, dangerous, and impossibly kind. She nodded slowly. "Okay." He stood. "Barn's got a pair of gloves. I'll show you the feed trough." She followed him out the sun, a pale gold bleeding over the hills. Frost still clung to the ground, but the air no longer felt deadly. She didn't talk, she just learned. By noon, she had helped patch a roof and scrub the basin. Her hands ached, her knees wobbled, but something small had stirred in her chest. Not trust. Not yet, but something close to breathing again. Will noticed how she didn't flinch when he handed her a tool. How she worked until her arms shook, and a quiet certainty settled in him too. He wasn't fixing her. She wasn't saving him. But the house felt different now. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. They wouldn't call it staying. But that's what it was. By the 3rd day, Maria had stopped jumping at every creak of the floorboards. Her shoulders weren't so tight. Her eyes didn't dart around the room. She was moving like a person, not a hunted thing. The work never stopped, and she never complained. She was outside before the sun had fully risen, trying to break ice out of the water trough with a rusted iron rod. Will worked near the barn, hauling sacks of feed, his limp a slow metronome in the silence. The questions hung in the air between them, unspoken. Where had she come from? Why was she alone? And more quietly, why hadn't? Will asked. He saw the bruises, the flinch, the way she shrank from a sudden movement. But he never pushed. He just let the silence hold it all. Later they sat at the table, eating their quiet meal of oats. Maria broke the silence, her voice soft. "How long have you lived out here?" He chewed slowly, deliberately before answering. 3 winters. "You've been alone all that time?" He gave a small shrug. "That's how I like it." "Then what did you do before this?" He took a breath, his gaze fixed on a distant point. "Hunted men, first for the army, then for money." She didn't say anything, but the words settled over the room. The limp, the scars, the watchful eyes. It all made sense now. You ever kill someone who didn't deserve it? Will's jaw tightened. He looked down at the burned scar on his hand, the lines a painful memory. Once he said, his voice a low gravel. A boy. Didn't see him till it was too late. Gunfire smoke. Wrong place, wrong moment. Maria didn't pity him. She just absorbed it. Is that why you stopped? Part of it, he said, his voice a quiet confession. Got tired of thinking I knew what justice looked like. Turns out it changes depending on who's paying. She understood that truth better than most. I was sold twice, she said, the words coming from a place of dry, hard honesty. First time was legal. My father owed too much. Second time wasn't. The man who took me decided he owned me. I ran when I heard him say he'd trade me for a rifle and a bottle. She didn't look at him, but she felt his steady, unmoving attention. That was 3 days before I got to Bentwood Flats. I didn't sleep for any of them. He nodded once, as if he'd already known. He didn't apologize. He didn't say she was safe. He just refilled her coffee and said, "Suppose you're not running anymore." "I don't think I can," she admitted. "Not right now." "Then don't," he said. "Not yet." That afternoon, they worked together, stacking firewood by the fence. Her hands were blistered, but she didn't complain. When she saw him pause, rubbing his knee, she went inside and came back with water and a clean rag. "You need rest," she said, her voice a command, not a question. He shook his head. "I rest at night." "Not well," she said. "You twitch. Talk in your sleep." That made him stop. He looked at her, then truly saw that she had been watching him too. "Used to wake up swinging," he said quietly. "Don't anymore, but it's still there." She nodded. "I wake up thinking someone's in the room. Takes a while to stop checking the corners." "You still check less." They stood there, the wood stacked waist-high between them, the sun, a slow warmth on their backs. "You planning on staying through winter?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "I haven't planned anything in years." He gave a slow nod. "Well, if you do stay, we'll need more kindling." And the chimney swept before snowfall. "I'll teach you how." It was a simple statement about a future, however small. And for the first time, Maria didn't feel like she had to earn a right to breathe. That night, she made supper a stew of beans and salt pork. She cut the vegetables. He stirred. The silence wasn't heavy. It was shared. Before bed, she sat on the porch, watching the stars, the shawl wrapped tight around her. Will came out to check the goats, and when he saw her sitting there, he didn't say a word. He just took his hat off the hook and placed it gently on her head. Then, he walked to the barn without looking back. She sat there, her fingers on the brim, and for the first time since her father died, she didn't feel like property. She felt like a person. The first frost settled 2 weeks after Maria arrived. It came in the night, a silent ghost of white tightening the boards and making the goats huddle close. Will stepped out into the pre-dawn dark, his breath, a cloud in the bitter air. His old wound told him the cold would only get worse. He was used to preparing alone, but this year was different. Inside, Maria was already up, stirring the coals back to life. She had started doing this on her own, a quiet, unasked-for part of their new routine. She moved with purpose, not like a guest, but like someone who belonged. Will watched her for a moment before stepping in. "You ever been through a winter up here?" he asked, his voice low. "No," she said, her eyes on the kettle. "Closest I got was one winter in Dead Ridge, but I was locked in a back room most of it. Didn't see much of the weather." He nodded. "It's long and cold. Storms knock the fence down at least twice. Water freezes solid. Roads vanish." She didn't flinch. "What do you need me to do?" He set a sack of dry cornmeal down. "Check the root cellar. Need to patch that corner wall before snow gets in. After that, we'll split wood until your arms give out." She cracked the faintest smile. "First joke I've heard out of you. I don't do many." They moved through the day with purpose, words coming later if they came at all. After supper of boiled potatoes and smoked rabbit, she washed the dishes while he cleaned a rusted trap. She noticed the burned scar on his shoulder again, a thick, uneven line. She didn't ask, but she thought about it. The fire in the stove crackled, and Maria sat on the cot, twisting the edge of her quilt. "You don't ask me much," she said finally. He looked up from the trap. "Should I?" "I don't know. Most men do." "I'm not most men." She hesitated. "You ever wonder who I was before?" He took a breath. "Sometimes, but I figure if you wanted to tell me, you would." She nodded slowly. "You're the first person that didn't want my story before giving me bread." He stood and walked to the shelf, pulled down a tin of dried beans for tomorrow's supper. You got hands that know work. You don't ask for extra. You know when to leave silence alone. That tells me enough. I used to think if I didn't tell men what I'd been through, they'd invent something worse in their heads. He finally looked at her then, his gaze steady and clear. I don't need a reason to treat someone decent, he said. Not anymore. She let those words settle slow and heavy. That night after the fire was low, he reached up and unlatched the attic crawl space above the stove. He pulled down a bundle, a thin wool coat stitched by hand small enough for a woman. He laid it on the chair beside her cot without a word and limped back toward the door. Well, she said the name, a soft question. He turned. She paused. Did someone used to live here before me? His jaw tightened. He didn't speak right away. For a while, a woman, he nodded, and the finality of it hung in the air. She didn't stay. He walked out to the barn, the door closing softly behind him. Maria pulled the coat onto her lap. It smelled of cedar and smoke. She didn't know what she was to him yet, but she was here. And for now, that was something. Outside, the wind picked up, and Will sat in the dark with a lantern sharpening a small axe. He wasn't reaching for a gun, and for the first time in years, he didn't need to. Snow came early, a soft sticking curtain of white. It lay thick on the ground, making the world quieter and harder to reach. The cold bit harder, sharp enough to split wood and sting skin. Will had started moving differently, checking the firewood twice a day, wrapping the windows tighter. He'd done it all before, but not with someone else in the house. Maria felt it too. She had a coat, a bed, a warm place without a price. Still, the silence wasn't always easy. There were nights she lay awake, the wind pressing against the walls, and the memory of old hands. Old rooms came back to haunt her. But now there was something else too. The sound of Will's boots across the floor, his steady movements, his silence that meant safety, not control. One morning just past first light, she stepped out to get kindling and saw him standing at the edge of the goat pen, his rifle slung across his back. She hadn't seen it out since she'd arrived. You see something? She asked, her voice low. He didn't look at her. Tracks. 2 horses cut across the ridge last night. Her stomach tightened. Could it be him? She didn't have to say the name. Maybe. He turned to her, his face calm and solid. We don't panic. We prepare. Back inside. He pulled down a small box of ammunition, a second revolver, a long hunting knife. He didn't wave them around. He just checked them, cleaned them, and set them aside. Maria watched him. She went and lit the lantern without being asked. You want me to hide if someone comes? She asked. He shook his head. You don't hide anymore. Not unless you want to. She nodded. That was enough. They spent the rest of the day making the house tighter, sealing the cellar door, clearing the front path. He didn't ask if she was scared. He knew she was, but she didn't shake. She kept moving beside him. By evening, the house was a fortress of light and warmth. They sat at the table, steam rising from their bowls. Will finally broke the silence. You said he traded you for a rifle. Maria looked at him. That was the plan. He said I wasn't worth food anymore. Will nodded. And you think he's looking for you? I don't think he likes losing. He doesn't let things go easy. Will sat back in his chair. He comes here, he'll leave empty. Maria didn't smile, didn't relax. He won't understand that. Don't need him to. The rest of the night passed in quiet readiness. Just before she went to her cot, Maria turned to him. Why do you still have the second bed? She asked, her voice soft. The one in the attic. You didn't throw it out. He looked up, then stood and walked to the stove, tossing another log on the fire. I built this place for someone, he said, after a long pause. Thought it'd be a life, but she didn't stay. Can't blame her. I wasn't someone worth staying for back then. Maria watched the fire flicker against his face. Do you think you are now? He turned to her, his jaw tight. I don't know, he said, but I'm trying. That answer hung heavy in the air. She nodded and stepped toward the cot, folding the quilt neatly. Then she sat a moment watching the orange light. Will, standing near the fire, didn't speak again. But he didn't leave either. That night, she didn't dream of being chased. And Will, for the first time in years, left his rifle leaning by the door, not in his reach. He believed just for tonight he wouldn't need it. 3 days passed without more tracks. Will checked the ridge each morning, his rifle slung tight, his boots crunching in the snow. The trail had gone cold. Whoever passed through had either moved on or was waiting. He didn't tell Maria everything he saw, but he didn't put the rifle away either. It stayed by the front door, always loaded. Inside, their routine became their anchor. She mended his coat. He made sure her boots were drying by the stove. They didn't talk about what they were building, but it was real. Not sudden, just there. That morning, as snow fell thin and slow, Maria stood by the window, peeling potatoes. Will sat at the table, sorting through bent nails. The warmth of the house was a steady hum. She didn't turn to face him when she asked, "Did you lose her to the war?" He didn't answer right away. "No," he said, placing a straightened nail on a cloth. "I lost her after." She set down the knife. "She leave because of what you'd done." He raised his head, meeting her eyes. "She left because I stopped talking. She tried to understand what I'd been through, but I couldn't. I didn't know how to talk without bringing everything with it. So I shut down." "She waited 2 years," Maria said, her voice quiet. "That's longer than most would." She came to sit across from him, her fingers curled around the edge of the table. "You're different now." He looked down at his scarred, stiff hand. Maybe, still figuring that out. Later, as they gathered kindling, Maria noticed a loose plank in the barn wall. Snow blew through the gap. "We should fix that," she said. Will nodded. She walked to the shed, and Will watched her. The way she walked now, not cautious, but with purpose. Her shoulders were square. She belonged. As he ran his hand along the cold wall, he felt the sharp bite of the winter. If someone was still out there, they wouldn't wait forever. When Maria came back with the hammer, he held the board, and she nailed it down without hesitation. "Good work," he said. "You're welcome," she smirked. They walked back to the house, the snow crunching under their boots. The silence was familiar now, shared. That night, as they ate, he pulled a yellowed piece of paper from his coat. "My discharge," he said. "The army let me go after the ambush outside Irons Hollow. Said I'd done enough." "Is that where the fire happened?" He nodded. "Barn went up with a child still inside. I couldn't reach her." His voice was steady but low. "I gave up the badge after that. Told myself I didn't deserve a quiet life. So, I came out here. Built this place with my hands. Waited to rot." She looked at him long and quiet. "You're not rotting," she said. "You're living. You took me in when no one else would. You didn't ask for pity. I didn't have anything else left to ask with." He really looked at her, then past the bruised edges, past the fear. She didn't look fragile anymore. She looked like someone with fight in her. "You've earned your place here," he said. "I want you to know that." She swallowed hard. "I don't know what I am to you," she said quietly. "Not a servant. Not just someone passing through." "You're not passing through," he said. "Not unless you choose to." "And if I don't?" she asked. "Then we keep working," he said. "And you keep waking up here. Every day." Maria sat back, let the words settle in her bones. For the first time, she didn't flinch from the idea of staying. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, the stove glowed, 2 chairs pulled close to the table. For now, the past stayed where it belonged, behind them. The snow deepened, the cold bit harder. Maria had adjusted, wrapping her coat tight, keeping her hands busy. The rhythm of the days gave her something she hadn't had in years: structure without fear. But winter didn't stop the past from moving. That morning, Will came in with snow on his shoulders and a strange look in his eye. "I spotted him from the ridge just before dawn," he said. "One man. Didn't come close, just circled and turned south." Maria set the spoon down carefully. "Did he see the ranch?" "I think he already knew where it was." Her hands gripped the counter. "That's him," she said quietly. Will stepped forward. "He's scouting. He might not come back right away, but he will." Maria took a breath. "What are you going to do?" "I've thought about that a lot." She turned. "So have I." They stood there, 2 people shaped by pasts they didn't choose, facing a confrontation neither had asked for. "You don't have to be here when it happens," Will said. "You want to leave, I won't stop you." She stared at him. "And go where?" "Back to hiding behind barns, sleeping in ditches. Number. You said yourself he doesn't let go easy." "Neither do I." Will's jaw tightened. She wasn't staying out of fear or obligation. She was staying because this house, this life, was hers to defend. "Then we prepare," he said. They spent the rest of the day making quiet adjustments. He showed her how to check the rifle's chamber. She didn't need a weapon of her own. Her part was to stay sharp, to hold the line with him. He set a tripwire with a bell near the woodshed. Mara salted the steps. Everything they did with purpose. That night, after supper, Maria sat by the stove, watching the flames. Will was oiling the front door's hinge. She broke the silence. I used to think if I ever saw him again, I'd run. Even in my dreams, I was always running. Will looked up. And now, she didn't look at him. Now I want him to see me standing. Will didn't respond, but something shifted in his face. A deep understanding. You think I'm being foolish? No, he said simply. I think you're done letting people take things from you. The fire popped. The wind pushed at the shutters, then quieted. When they turned in, Will didn't go to the barn. He stayed inside, his rifle resting within reach. He wasn't guarding the house. He was guarding her, and she, for her part, didn't protest. She laid down on the cot, and sleep came easier than it should have. Not because the fear was gone, but because she wasn't facing it alone. The next morning was colder than any so far. The water bucket had a thin layer of ice. Every board in the house groaned. Will had barely slept. He stood outside just before sunrise, his breath a visible cloud, his eyes scanning the tree line. No movement, no sound. He came back in, and Mara was already dressed, her hair tied back. Anything she asked. He shook his head. No sign. They ate in silence, a quiet focus settling between them. By midday, the air had gone still. The wind shifted, a stillness settling over the ridge. They both felt it. Then the sound came, hooves, slow, heavy, one rider. Will opened the door and stepped out first, his rifle resting at his side, not raised. Maria followed, stopping just behind him. The man coming down the path wore a long, dust-colored coat, his hat pulled low. His face was narrow, his smile a cruel twist. He stopped about 15 feet from the porch. He looked at Maria, then back at Will. Well, he said, his voice rough. She's still pretty. I wasn't sure what I'd find. Maria didn't flinch. You should leave. Ain't how this works, he sneered. She ran. She stole from me. I took nothing that was yours, she said, her voice firm. You don't own people. You were bought fair, he snapped. I got papers. Will's voice cut in, then flat and even. You bring a sheriff. The man ignored him. Will took a step forward. You bring a marshal. Someone to enforce those papers. He didn't think so. Then you don't have a claim. Not here. The man shifted in his saddle. You think this ends with talk? I think it ends right now, Will said. You turn that horse around. You don't come back. The man looked at Maria again. You think he'll keep you safe? Men like him, they break. One day they snap and forget who they're protecting. Maria stepped forward. You already broke. A long time ago. The man's smile vanished. Will's hand never left the rifle, but he didn't lift it. His presence, steady and calm, said more than any threat. You've got one chance, he said. You ride out, no one follows. You don't show your face again. The man spat on the ground, turned his horse, and rode off. No gun drawn, no shouting, just the slow crunch of hooves fading into the distance. Will waited until he was out of sight. He looked at Maria. You all right? She nodded, her eyes still on the trail. I'm not shaking. He let out a slow breath. Good. They went inside. No celebration, no words like, it's over. They both knew life didn't work that clean. But she hadn't run, and Will hadn't raised his rifle in fear. That evening, Maria sat at the table wiping her hands. I thought I'd feel relief, she said, but it's something else. What is it? Ownership, she said, like I finally chose what happens next. Will nodded. You did. She looked at him. You didn't shoot him. Didn't have to. Maria studied his face. You really changed. He nodded once. Because you stayed. Silence settled between them. The kind of silence that felt earned. She stood and walked toward him, stopping beside him. Neither moved. Then she reached out and rested her hand on his shoulder, just above the burn scar. He didn't flinch, and when he turned to face her, his hand came up careful, steady, and rested against her arm. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Whatever they were, it was clear now. Two people who had been broken standing whole beside each other. Spring came late, but it came. The snow hung on dripping from the porch roof, but the air was softer. The house stayed open a little longer each day. Maria no longer slept in her boots. The rifle still sat by the door, but it was just a memory. That morning, Will stood on the porch, watching, as Maria scattered feed for the goats. There was color in her face again. She looked like she belonged. He didn't say it, but the way he watched her, the way his hand would pause on the table, it all spoke for him. He didn't need her to stay. He wanted her to. Maria looked up and caught him watching. She walked toward him, a small, knowing softness in her eyes. We should replace the roof boards before the next rain, she said. I saw a rot setting in. Will nodded. I'll take the ladder out of the barn. She paused, then said quietly, I want to paint the inside too. The kitchen wall, it's always looked unfinished. He looked at her, truly looked. You want to paint a house? You might leave. I'm not leaving, she said. It didn't come out dramatic, just a quiet truth. I could have left. I thought about it after he rode off. But this place, it doesn't feel like survival anymore. It feels like something we made. We did the hard part already. Staying now, it's the easy part. Will's voice was quiet. You're not here because I saved you. No, she said. You didn't save me. You gave me space to come back to myself. That's not saving. That's respecting. He turned, walked to the edge of the porch, and pointed toward the field. Thinking of putting in another row of fence, maybe double the goats by fall. She stood beside him close enough for their shoulders to touch. We'll need to start clearing brush early if we want to make space. If that's all right, he said. He nodded once. Yeah, it island. They sat on the porch steps watching the sun go down. The air smelled of damp earth and sap. You think he'll ever come back? She asked. Will shook his head. Men like that don't come back after they lose. He saw something he didn't expect. He won't risk seeing it again. She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows. Maria stood and went inside and came back with the coat he had given her. She laid it across the rail and sat back down. Still cold some nights, she said. Winter's slow to leave, Will replied. But it always does. They sat there until the stars came out, until there was nothing but quiet between them and the land stretching out toward the hills. Something settled between them, unspoken but understood. Not just safety, not just rest. It was a life shared. No promises made, no declarations needed. Just the simple, clear truth that they had both stopped running. Maria stayed. Will healed. They kept working. And for the first time in both their lives, staying wasn't survival. It was home.